Hello, everybody, and thanks for joining me once again for my mini art talks. It's Janet Mandel, and today I'm going to talk about Edgar Degas. Now, Degas, when we think of Degas, we think of the ballet, paintings of the ballet. We think about maybe racehorses, but I'm going to show you something very different today. Edgar Degas' mother was born in New Orleans. She was an American citizen. And in 1872, Degas traveled there to visit his family. So the painting I'm going to discuss today is this one, Children on a Doorstep. It was painted on that trip. And his New Orleans family lived in this house. And it is still there today. It's on Esplanade Avenue in New Orleans. And this is a picture of my husband and me at the house, which is now a museum. And you see us with a docent there who took us around. And she is actually a great grandniece of Edgar Degas. And I just want you to notice, of course, the French flag here and this beautiful wrought iron balcony, because we're going to see that in one of these two paintings here. Now, Degas really enjoyed socializing with his family, but he did have one complaint about New Orleans, and that was the very hot weather, and the bright sun of New Orleans made painting en plein air out in the open very difficult for him. So he was relegated mostly to painting his women cousins, although he did paint his other cousins there as well, but in their domestic lives. And on the left here, you see a woman with a vase of flowers, and it's at the Musée d'Orsay, and that's his cousin Desiree Mousson. And then on the right is a woman seated on a balcony. You see that balcony there. That's where it was painted, right there in that house. And this is Mathilde Mousson-Bell, who was his other cousin. And you can see in these two paintings kind of the evidence of women's sheltered life in New Orleans. They were relegated mostly to staying inside, like his cousin on the left arranging flowers. And on the right, you didn't go out in the sun. God forbid you would get, your skin would darken in the sun. So you stayed on the balcony, and you can see her pale skin that's set off by this black choker around her throat. And also she's got this wonderful fan down here, which is very characteristic of Southern belles at the time. But his absolute favorite cousin was his cousin Estelle Mousson Degas. Now, yes, her last name was Degas. Why? Because she married Edgar's youngest brother, René. And they were first cousins, but that happened quite a lot there. And this painting of Estelle is in Copenhagen. Now, she had been married to René since 1869, and Degas is sort of kind of fascinated or almost obsessed with her. Nearly every single letter he writes home mentions Estelle. He writes about her a lot. Now, when this was painted, if you look at her, she was almost totally blind. And look at how he's depicted her with that blind person's disorientation. First of all, she's not in the center. She's a little bit off center. Askew, and she's staring off into the void, and she looks very austere, but it's still, even in its simplicity, it's still a very complex painting. Her gaze is kind of turned inward, even though she's looking away from us. What is confronting us exactly is her ear, because that's the sense that she depends on the most to have interactions with human beings. And I think that Degas is depicting her and showing us what it really must be like to someone that has lost their sight, what it must feel like to be Estelle. She is his beautiful but very sorrowful cousin. And this also might foreshadow his own fears about blindness, because Degas really did have problems with his eyes, and he was almost totally blind by the time of his death. So it's almost an eerie foreshadowing as well. But let's get back to our painting Children on the Doorstep. So despite his kind of sadness about Estelle and her condition, he was really very impressed with happy family life of his New Orleans cousins. And he wrote, "It is something really fine to be married, to have nice children, and to be freed of the need of casual affairs. Good heavens, it's time to think about it. But after he left New Orleans and went back to Paris, he gave up the idea of being married, and he died a lifelong bachelor. Now, this particular work is actually 3 different paintings in one. It's a genre scene, a scene of everyday people doing everyday things. It's also a family portrait because these are the children of his New Orleans cousins, and it's also a landscape. It's the view out of the back door of the house there on Esplanade Avenue. It's the very large garden between the back of his house and the house of their neighbors, the Oliviers. Now, this is what that view looks like today. You can see, if you look at the house, right, it does look like it's the same, but I was told that this is not the same house, but I thought that was really actually quite interesting. Now, this painting is also interesting because it's kind of the threshold between the interior and the exterior. Now, New Orleans had actually offered many interesting experiences for Degas, and in his last letter before leaving in March of 1873, he wrote home, "The black world. I have not the time to explore it. There are real treasures as regards drawing and color in these forests of ebony. I shall be very surprised to live among white people only in Paris. And then I love silhouettes so much, and these silhouettes walk." Yet, so interestingly, the only Black person he painted while he was in New Orleans is in this picture, and that's the Black nurse caring for the Mousson children. Now, why was there so much reluctance to paint these forests of ebony, these treasures that he talked about? Well, and also, if you look, he does paint her kind of in profile, in silhouette here, but we see very little detail of all the children. But she does remain the most mysterious figure in the painting, I think. So what is the mystery here? Well, it turns out that the Degas family did have a secret. And their secret was that there was a branch of the Degas family that was of mixed race. Now, the brother of Degas' maternal grandmother was Vincent Rillieux, so that was Degas' great uncle. Now, he had 6 children with a woman called Constance Vivant, and Constance was a free woman of color. She was educated, and they were actually married in all except state recognition because, of course, interracial marriage was illegal in the South at that time. Many white members of the bourgeoisie had Negro or colored mistresses at the time, and they lived at home with their white family, but they kept their Black family separate, but not Vincent Rillieux. He actually lived with Constance Vivant, and they raised their 6 children together. So Degas had many mixed-race Rillieux cousins, which I thought was absolutely fascinating and is not that well known about him. Now, the descendants of the Mousson and Degas families and Vincent Rillieux actually do not have much to do with each other even to this day. There was an art exhibition of Degas paintings several years ago in New Orleans, and the Rillieux family was not invited to participate at all. And our tour guide at the house was very eager to change the subject when I asked her about the Rillieux family, and I really couldn't get any more information out of her. But it is interesting, the son of Vincent Rillieux, Norbert Rillieux, actually became a very prominent and important person. But I don't have time to go into that now. So if you check with the schedule on my webpage, and if I'm doing a Degas talk, which would be a longer form talk, you can find out, I do go into it in some great detail, and you can find out much more about it. Anyway, the fraught relationship between the Mousson Degas families and the Rillieux families shows us that the subject of race is everywhere, and it is still as fraught in 2020 as it was in 1873. So thanks for joining me for this session of my mini art talks. I'd like to remind you once again that if you're on Facebook, you can go to the search bar, put Janet Mandel Art Talks in there, and come to my Facebook page. Please join it. I put up interesting things about what's happening internationally, really, in the art world. I also have a YouTube channel, please go there, Janet Mandel Art Talks channel. And I have posted there these mini art talks, and this was my 26th. So please go there and see the rest of them. And while you're there, subscribe so that you can make sure to see them. And of course, hit the bell, and that will tell you, you'll get a little email as when I upload a new one. And then also I am on Instagram, Art Talks with Janet. And I do have a website. You don't have to memorize that URL. You just have to go to Google and put Janet Mandel Art Talks in there. And when you go, you can click on the schedule button. And I have just put up my September schedule, where I will be doing longer art talks. And most of them are free. A few are not. They're for adult schools and senior centers, and they can really use the support. The fee is not that much. So I hope you'll join me for them. So again, thanks so much for coming to my mini art talks. And I'm looking forward to seeing you again very soon. Bye-bye. Stay safe. Wear your masks.